It's the 101st anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And it's really short and simple, which politicians don't usually do, but I want to read it to you. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. And by that vote, by that amendment, we women finally got the right to vote. And it's our superpower. Can you see my shirt? Voting is a superpower. The right to vote. It took more than 70 years of women fighting and men fighting alongside us to get this right, this little bit of equality. And although we've come a long way, we are still working toward total equality. The Equal Rights Amendment, among other things. Equal pay for equal work. More job opportunities. It makes me sad that not all women use their power to vote, even today. Or I know of women still who have the males in their life tell them how they should vote, or they seek other sources. But most of us realize how precious it is, and that is why we observe this observation of the 19th Amendment every August the 26th. And we vote in every election, and many of us run for and are elected to office. Today we march from the Owensboro Museum of Science and History to demonstrate the joy and the sense of power that comes with that. We want to set an example for young women and girls. We stand together in unity for all equality, full equality for all. And we ask that you stand with us. Democracy has to be constantly defended and studied and understood. Having a right does not mean that you have it forever. The American Association of University Women and the Daviess County Bar Association understand that. Equality under the law. And that is why we're here today with the Owensboro Museum of Science and History, the Daviess County Fiscal Court, and the City of Owensboro to proclaim this important anniversary. Women all across the state and country, and right here in Daviess County, marched and spoke and wrote articles and signed petitions. Sometimes women were jailed and force-fed and mocked and reviled, but they did not give up. The vote means power, superpower, and that's why we're here today. I think now we will have the welcome from the
presentation of colors.
The presentation of colors. Yes. Thank you.
That way you keep people straight.
Somebody has to keep me straight. Yes. I think everybody has. All right, the Pledge of Allegiance. If you will all, those who are able to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was just looking for our singers. Yes. Wait till they're through. All right, we will now have an invocation by the Reverend Claudia Ramish, who will lead us in meditation and prayer right now. You estimated my height a little bit. Yeah. Before I begin, I would like to invite you to
pause for a moment in sympathy and support for those who died in Afghanistan today. Spirit of life and liberty, we are gathered to celebrate the certification of the 19th Amendment on this day 101 years ago. This amendment, assuring there would be no impediment to voting based on sex, is a treasured moment in our American history. Be with us as we reflect on its meaning at this event. Spirit of peace and justice, the day of certification was a hard-won day. It was a day that was a remembrance of a right still withheld in too many places around the world. As we remember the suffragettes and their allies, we are inspired by their vision and decades of persistence. Keep us steady and faithful to the work for voting rights that is still before us. As we remember the legislators and activists early in the last century, we see possibilities for social change in our era. Open our hands to partnerships with those still denied any of their rights. As we stand beside a monument of Louise Gasser Kirtley, a local woman of courage and conviction and amazing firsts in our area and the Commonwealth, strengthen our resolve to step up and to step out, even when others can't or won't. And as we stand in recollection, we acknowledge too how much was left undone on that day in 1920. Let us extend our celebration to all those who broadened the effort in the waves of civil and human rights work throughout the 20th century. Keep us honest about our own shortcomings and make us worthy of all who gave themselves to secure our rights. And renew our resolve to continue the work for justice. Bless and sustain those who complete our work and begin even greater things. Finally, spirit of wisdom and mercy, as we commemorate this stepping stone to justice with joy and gratitude, we stand together in humble prayer. Open our eyes to what we've yet overlooked or avoided. Open our ears to our neighbors pleading for help and hope. Open our minds to better understanding of the needs in our community and society. And open our hearts to discern the best ways to overcome the tyranny of hidden oppression, to subdue the danger of unexamined majority, to heal divisions, and to truly embrace the common good rather than our own comfort. In peace we pray. Thank you, God, and amen.
Amen.
Wonderful. We're now going to have some music. Dr. Dennis Jewett is the director, but I don't believe he's with us today, or is he?
No, this is his visit.
Okay. Well, but he has sent to us the voices of Shelby Ratliff, Susan Dant, Lorraine North, and Olivia Lynch. And they are going to sing my very favorite, America the Beautiful, and then they're going to sing a couple of suffrage songs for us. The ladies.
For beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with sisterhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, God meant thine every flaw. Confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law. Oh, beautiful for patriotry that sees beyond the years, We have heard a song of triumph, it has rolled from shore to shore, a song of joy and gladness which we'll sing forevermore. Woman suffrage sure is coming to the land which we adore. Come help us win the vote. Soon the women will be voting. Soon the women will be voting. Soon the women will be voting. Come help us win the vote. Come sisters of the sunny south, we need your help today. Come comrades of the eastern states, we know you're on your way. Our western sisters join us and they sing this happy lay. You soon will win the vote. Soon the women will be voting. Soon the women will be voting. Soon the women will be voting. You soon will win the vote. When woman comes marching to her own, hurrah, hurrah, a royal welcome she'll be shown, hurrah, hurrah. The bells will ring, the band will play, we'll give her Godspeed on her way, for we'll bless the day when woman comes to her own. The very streets will smile and shout, hurrah, hurrah, for cleanliness to reign throughout, hurrah, hurrah. The winds will set, the echoes free, the birds will join and sing, for gleeful we'll bless the day when woman comes to her own. With no uncertain step she comes, hurrah, hurrah. She'll sweep the city of its slums, hurrah, hurrah. She'll show us how to legislate, to save and to upbuild the state. We'll bless the day when woman comes to her own.
Thank you all so much. That really sets the tone and gets our hearts beating here today. This morning, Keith Lawrence had an article in the paper that some of you may have read, and he was talking about the writer or the musician, Tom T. Hall, and he said that one of the things that, and it made me think of this, that he was writing about America the Beautiful, and he said, if we get our heads and hearts together, we won't have to hear the song America the Ugly today. And I would hope that the whole purpose of this thing today is to get our heads and hearts together, working for equality for everybody. At this time, I would like to recognize Judge Executive Al Mattingly, who has a proclamation and a few words to say.
Hey, hello.
Oh, okay.
What I'm going to do is, first of all, welcome all of you to, in my opinion, the nicest green space in downtown Owensboro. And it's one of the nicest spaces because of our groundskeeper, Jerry Alms, back here. Jerry, raise your hand. Everything that you see on this lawn is because of his hard work. And, he brought out the chairs, spaced them, put everything together, and he'll stay and clean it up when this is all over. Right, Jerry? That's what I thought. Before I say anything or go any further, I want to welcome our folks from the mayor's office to come up and read their proclamation and to have a few remarks. I think it's only fitting and neighborly.
Commissioner Mark Caslin is going to have a few words to say.
Oh, you did? Yeah. You can read mine if you want.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Commissioner Mark Caslin. I just want to thank you all for showing up today and inviting me to come to this great event. There's more people here than what I thought would be, and that says a lot for our city as far as people supporting each other and the people wanting to vote. We gather here today to celebrate 101 years of women having the right to vote. Let us not forget that this right was not given, it was fought for and won by strong, determined women. Women who had marched, women who had hunger strikes, and women who protested for a long time to get this right. As I look around here, I see a lot of strong women, and I feel fortunate to have all of you here. The resolve to win and overcome all obstacles is what has brought this chance for women to vote to the forefront and has made it last for 101 years. But we have to remember that although we fought for this and we have won this right, we can never forget that we must stand true and keep fighting for women's rights and for these young children that are growing up, which is great to see them show up today. And to also remember that we must never forget and let this opportunity ever be taken away from the women in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Caslin. I was going to have you speak, but I thought since it was the home turf for the judge, I was going to let him go first, but now he has to be able to come up. He has to be able to come up and be as good as you.
Gives me a chance to rebut.
Yeah. Also, City Commissioner Bob Glenn says he wants to say a few words, and far be it from me to keep these men from speaking.
But I'm here to support women in their cause. Let me just share a real quick story with you. My name's Bob Glenn. I'm a city commissioner. Many years ago, my father walked out on my mother and I. She raised me as a single parent. And she went to the bank to pay the rent, normal procedure, and there was $8.79 in that checking account. There was not enough money to buy groceries. There was not enough money to pay the rent on our apartment. And she went to the bank manager and she said, I didn't do this. There's got to be money here. I need help. And he said, well, ma'am, you can't do anything by yourself. You're a woman. But I'm going to do you a favor, and I'm going to co-sign a temporary loan for you and a credit card for you and separate all these other obligations to your what I assume will be your ex-husband. That was in 1971. Now, I want you to think about this. Voting means nothing, as Aloma has pointed out, for all of us if we don't use it to change the world. And that's what my mother did each and every time she voted. She voted for men and women of character who are ready to produce equity in the workplace, in school, and in every other place. And finally, I'll conclude with this. When we look at Afghanistan, we'll look at all that young women and women in that country have gained over the last 20 years at the sacrifice of the blood and treasure of our soldiers. And all of that may be lost in the blink of an eye. But let's not lose it here in America, and every step we can take to promote it in other countries, let's do it. Women and girls deserve every right possible to grow, to evolve, and to become the most productive citizens possible. That's what this day is about, and that's what the 19th Amendment is about.
Spoken like a true feminist. And now another feminist is going to come and speak briefly.
I've never done anything briefly. So now, if I was smart, I wouldn't have allowed Bob to speak in front of me. I think Bob is a teacher out at a professor at OCTC, and he teaches speech, debate, and what else? All kinds of stuff. Just part-time. All right. You know, we're here for a couple reasons today. One is to rededicate the memorial to Louise Kirtley Gasser, and I would just say what I said last year and was printed in the Messenger Enquirer, that this monument, this memorial, is the first one on this courthouse lawn dedicated to a woman. How about that? All these years, you look around and you see monuments dedicated to lots of men, and most of these monuments have something to do with war of one type or another. I think we could probably find some women that we could dedicate them to, because a lot of the women that I've known have been just as mean and nasty as some of the men that these things are dedicated to. Oh, by the way, Will, I saw you come up. Hi, son. When I attended the Multicultural Festival Saturday, one of the things, I stopped by a booth and it talked about women of note. And it got me to thinking, women of note. And certainly Louise Kirtley Gasser was a woman of note. But there are lots of women of note in this community that live their lives and they are never noted, except by those who love them. One of them is Mildred Lucas, and I don't know if you know who Mildred Lucas was. She was the wife of a ex-Confederate jailer who gave his life protecting an African-American inmate in the jail. The jail was stormed and he was killed, and she was appointed to take his place. And at the next election, believe it or not, she won the election for jailer. There's not a lot of people that know that. Did she serve as jailer? No. Because she was a woman, the judge refused to certify the election. I hope it was a judicial judge, Judge Miller, and not a county judge. If you had been here, you wouldn't have done that, I know. The Catherine Griffin is another one, and I wasn't aware of this. In 1945, she was elected as county clerk. Pretty cool. Not a lot of people remember that. Certainly, Miss Gasser is a person that we honor. But there are other women of note. Elvira Burden. Elvira Burden worked as a sharecropper's wife and had a daughter named Gertrude Carter. Now that's her married name. Gertrude Carter worked as a sharecropper's wife in the tobacco fields, side by side. Worked as hard as Mr. Carter did, and still came in and put supper on the table and washed the clothes and fed the kids and did all those other things while Mr. Carter had a nip and smoked a cigarette. By the way, back then you rolled them in paper. They had a daughter named Connie who married a man named Mattingly. Now that happens to be my mother, a woman of note who had 12 children. One of them, the oldest, is Al Mattingly, who married Judy Wolfe. A woman of note, particularly to my son standing back there, since she birthed him. But a woman of note, and I'm taking a moment of personal privilege, with whom I celebrated 50 years of marriage this past Saturday. We dated for 7 years, and then I've been married for 50, and I made the comment, what in the world was she thinking when she said yes? Those are all personal. But remember, women of note. It means women who make a difference in your life are women who make a difference in other lives. Another one I can tell you is Martha Reed. Martha Reed was a neighbor lady, and she whooped my butt just like my mama did when it needed to be whooped. And I cried when I stopped by and visited with her the day before she passed away. A real difference in my life. Sister Ruth Agnes, a sister of charity, taught biology at Catholic High, and had such a love for learning that she actually was the one that influenced me to go into my love, educational love, which was biology. Sister Casimir at Brescia College, Sister Martha Ann at Brescia College, Sister Ruth Garris. Probably if it hadn't been for Sister Ruth, I'd have gotten mad and quit college because I thought I was being mistreated. And she said, "Buck up, boy." And I listened to her. All of these women down through the ages have been inspiring and have left their mark. We don't memorialize them, but you do. You have today, when you march for women's rights, for women equality, when you march for equal pay. I find it interesting when we talk about equality. It's not something that you should have to fight for. Women shouldn't have had to fight for the vote. African Americans shouldn't have had to fight for the rights that they have today. Our Latinos and Asian Americans and all of those folks from foreign lands who have fought to get here, that's the fight. Once they get here, they should be treated equal, just as each and every one of you believed and proved and showed to us as you came marching down that street. Aloma asks me every year to speak here, and she does so because she knows I have 7 sisters. And each and every one of those sisters have a different story to tell. All are women of note. They've raised their families, they've done their part. And today I want to thank them as well as all of you women who are here today and all of our feminists, Mr. Glenn, who are here today. While you shouldn't have had to fight the fight, you did. You didn't give up. And all of us today are better for what you have done. All of us today are better for what you have done in the community. All of us today are better for what you will do. As I watched the Girls Inc. kids come in, I went and fist bumped every one of them. And as I look through the crowd today, we won't be equal in this community until we have a woman for mayor or a woman county judge. I hope that happens in my lifetime, but I'm not sure it will if I don't remind each and every one of you that the woman of note in my life today is my wife, Judy. And without her guidance and without her encouragement, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So, with that, I have a proclamation from the office of the County Judge Executive. Whereas in 1848, women of the United States began organizing peaceful protests for their right to fully and equally participate in workplaces, libraries, organizations, and public facilities, as well as the right to vote and participate in government. And whereas in 1971, Congress designated August 26 as Women's Equality Day to serve as a symbol of the ongoing fight for equal rights. And whereas on January 16, 1895, a group of 10 Owensboro women formed the Political Equality Club of Owensboro to secure to women the unrestricted exercise of all rights of citizenship and equal constitutional rights with men and equal protection of the law. And whereas born in Daviess County in 1921, Clara Sanford Oldham dedicated her life to enhancing the lives of women through numerous achievements, including founding and co-founding many local women-focused services and organizations, and her dedicated focus toward the passage of equal rights amendments, all of which exemplifies her commitment to ensuring equal rights. And whereas women play a critical role in families, the workplace, and in society as a whole, contributing to our economy, advancing our nation, and through the efforts of many equal rights advocates and champions, we get to today celebrate locally and nationally Women's Equality Day and pay tribute to all women who have and continue to strive for equality. We pay tribute to all women of note. Now, therefore, I, Al Mattingly, Daviess County Judge Executive, do hereby proclaim August 26, 2021 as Women's Equality Day. Miss Duke, you want me to give it to you?
Sure.
Oh, here, I do this, and I'm going to hug you anyway. Okay.
Thank you so much.
And by the way, thanks for this sash. I just don't know how to wear it. It keeps falling down.
Never ask him to speak a few words. However, you sort of stole some of my thunder, because next year we're hoping to be celebrating Mildred Summers Lucas. But I want to tell you that as nice as these three men are, the day I will be happy is when there are women sitting there holding elective office in this city. And we've had some. We've got one of our former city commissioners, Pam Smith-Wright, back there right now. And we will have more if you all and God are willing. Thank you for this, Judge. And I also, before I let you go, let the next speaker, I do want to say that Jenny Warren deserves a lot of credit, because she works with the judge and she helps make sure that he gets these things done. So Jenny is a woman of note.
Thank you all. I'm Jeannie Owen Miller, and I'm here to introduce our keynote speaker. I have to say that there's very few people that I know that would travel all the way across the state of Kentucky to come and speak to a group of women and men to celebrate women's right to vote. But Marcia Milby Ridings is such a person. She lives in London, Kentucky, and she has practiced law there, I think, since 1976. She joined her father's law firm in 1976, and she went to undergraduate at Georgetown College, and she went to the University of Kentucky, yay, for her master's degree, and also she graduated from the University of Kentucky College of Law with distinction, and she has been practicing as a litigator since that time. And I think that's very, very important. You know, when I started looking at Marcia's resume that she sent to me, holy cow, it was 3 pages long, single space, and 8-point font. That's how accomplished she is. And she said, please don't embarrass me by reading all of that, and I won't. But I do want to point out some things, because when I was reading through it and what I know of her personally, there were so many similarities to Louise Gasser Kirtley that I just could not mention it. You know, first of all, she basically raised a son on her own, and she now has a son who practices law with her. Does this sound familiar? Bobby? She also has a son who is sitting on the Board of Governors of the Kentucky Bar Association for that district, and I'm sure will continue her wonderful work with the Kentucky Bar Association. She was not only known, but very highly respected in every group that she joined and worked for. But she was the first woman to lead her professional association, and that was also the case with Louise Gasser Kirtley. Marcia Milby Ridings was the first female president of the Kentucky Bar Association in 1995, and that gained a lot of traction for those women like myself who came later. But she also had some other similarities to Louise. They weren't just active in their professional association, although I cannot imagine how much time was spent with everything she has done. But they were also very active in their communities and really belonged to organizations that promoted women's rights, but also children's rights, and also health and safety. She was on, public library boards. She's literally just done it all. And I'm just so blessed that she's come to say a few words. I do want to say that some of her major highlights of her professional career was that she became the University of Kentucky College of Law Hall of Fame in 2016, and she was named the Outstanding Lawyer of the Year by the Kentucky Bar Association in 2006. So you can get a little bit of an idea of what all she has done. But most importantly, I met her in the mid-'80s when we both belonged to the Kentucky Academy of Trial Attorneys. Now, for those of you that practice law out there, litigation is probably one of the hardest things to do as a lawyer. And Marcia has been a litigator pretty much all of her professional life. And there were just a handful of us. Sandy Freeberger, who is here with us today, was the president of the Kentucky Academy of Trial Attorneys about around that time, 1989, I think, Sandy. Isn't that right? Yeah. And then I became the president in 2001. And it's an organization that had very, very few women litigators. And Marcia was one of them that I first met, and she was always very, very encouraging to me. And so I have asked her to come, and she has come all the way from London. She has to drive all the way back tonight because in the morning she's got a mediation. So without further ado, please welcome Marcia Milby Ridings.
Thank you, Judge Miller. It's really nice to be here in Owensboro, and I'm particularly flattered to be here to honor Louise Gasser Kirtley, who I did not know, but she's the real First Lady of Law, who I'm sure was an inspiration to many of you all as an attorney, a judge, legislator, long before being a woman lawyer was cool, and I'm sure she could really tell you a lot of stories. But I was asked to talk to you just a little bit about my experiences as a lawyer and as a bar leader. And I'm sure my stories can't possibly compare with hers, but it did give me an opportunity to look back, way back, to my days in law school. Let's go back to 1973. The incoming class had about 150 students, 30 of which were women. Now that is more than the 10 years before us put together. We were the first group of women, large group of women in the law school. And our class was not so traditional in other ways too. It was the end of the Vietnam War. We had several Vietnam veterans in our class. And in addition to having more women than usual, some of the women were a little bit older. I, for instance, had put my husband through law school. Several women had other careers. Several women waited till their children were up in grade school before we started. So it was a different group, and the scene was certainly different with all these women around in the halls of the University of Kentucky College of Law. However, of course, with the influx of the women, there were logistic matters. First of all, think about the restrooms. I think there might have been 3 toilets for all the women in the law school. Now there's a brand new school now, and it's been renovated, but then there were not, just little things like toilets. And the professors hardly knew what to think about this influx of women law students. We had this kindly professor whose name was Professor Ham. He was just a charming gentleman. And one year during a break, my best friend then and now, Sandy Freeberger, who's here, got divorced. And at the beginning of the class, Professor Ham was going through the roster, and he said, Mrs. Martin. And she nicely corrected him, said no, that her name was Freeberger. And sweet Professor Ham congratulated her on getting married over the break. It never dawned on him that the marriage would have ended. We had another not so kind professor, and I won't use his name, but he made the comment back then that women in law school were either workless sex machines or sexless work machines. That was the kind of thing we had to deal with. But we prevailed. We had potlucks. Several women and even a few men would bring their children to school on snow days. What else were they to do? We commandeered a clean lounge because the student lounge was so dirty from all the guys that we wouldn't use it. We made lifelong friends, and we graduated. And I want to point out that it wasn't I, but the woman who graduated first in our class was a woman. After law school, I clerked for a federal judge for a couple of years, but then I was thrown into real life. I started practicing law in Eastern Kentucky. I wasn't the first woman lawyer in Eastern Kentucky, but I was the first trial lawyer in Eastern Kentucky, and probably a 15-county radius. I was the first woman who was actually trying cases. The judges thought I was either a court reporter, honey, you can sit over here, or maybe a paralegal, or even a client. But they hardly knew what to think. But I really have to tell you that once they got used to my being in the courtroom, I was really treated with respect. I have heard horror stories of other parts of the state and of other states from my sisters in the law who had trouble and terrible issues with lawyers and judges and how they treated them. I cannot add to those stories. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, Eastern Kentucky women have always been strong, hardworking women. There's the old joke, excuse me for the men, but there's an old joke that a man in Eastern Kentucky is a real go-getter. He takes his wife to work and then he'll go get her. But seriously, Eastern Kentucky women are strong, hardworking, and for the most part respected, and I had that. The other reason for my paved way is probably more personal. My father was a big fish in a very small pond, but he was quite respected in our small pond area. And I think the judges and the attorneys were particularly kind to me out of respect for him. Now, at first you'd think, well, wait a minute. You shouldn't have to be a lawyer's daughter to be treated well in a traditionally male world. But finally, it dawned on me that if I was helped along by others for whatever reason, and if I didn't totally mess things up, then I could make things easier for the women who followed who didn't have the advantage of being from a legal background. And that's what I've tried to do. Now, of course, women in the courtroom are commonplace. The last case I actually tried pre-COVID was in Letcher County, Whitesburg, Kentucky, about as far Eastern Kentucky as you can get. The judge was a woman, and 2 of the 4 attorneys were women. So times really have changed, but it did take a while from the 70s when I started to get there. Now let's fast forward to the mid-'80s. I got divorced, I had a young child, and in 1986, I was appointed to the Board of Governors for the Kentucky Bar Association. My friend David Ewell was there from the very beginning and welcomed me with open arms, but I was the first woman on the Board of Governors. Now, for you non-lawyers, the Board of Governors is the governing body of the Kentucky State Bar. If you're a member of if you're a lawyer in Kentucky, you have to be a member of the Kentucky Bar Association. Back then, there were about 13,000 lawyers. We decided procedural issues. We decided discipline of our fellow lawyers, and it was, and as I said, it was the first woman on the board at the time. Now, officers for the bar traditionally come from the ranks of the Board of Governors. Not everyone on the Board of Governors becomes an officer, but with a few exceptions, almost always the president or officers come through the Board of Governors. So it was probably common that people said to me, "Are you going to run for president of the bar?" And my answer was, "Oh no, I'm a single mother. I'm just now coming into my own as a trial lawyer. I can't possibly take on any more responsibilities." But then there was a meeting that changed the direction of my career. There was a bar convention in the late 80s, early 90s, and the featured speaker that year was Sarah Weddington, who most of you all know was the woman who argued Roe versus Wade before the United States Supreme Court. I believe she was in her 20s or early 30s. She went on to do a lot of other things. She was Deputy Chief of Staff to President Jimmy Carter. She taught at the University of Texas. She's written some books on leadership, but she's most known as being with Roe versus Wade, and that was in a way one of the reasons she was asked to speak. But she asked the people at the bar convention if she could have a breakfast just for women. And it was 7 o'clock one morning because it wasn't on the schedule. And she had a breakfast just for women. And she spoke, there were probably 30 of us there, and she spoke to the group. But I thought she said something that was directed just at me. She said, "Women, we can't have it both ways. We complain because there aren't women judges or city council members or officers. Yet, if it's offered to us, people say, 'Oh, I can't do that. I have household responsibilities.'" She said that women have to step up to the plate, swing for the fences, and balance the aspects of her life. She emphasized that we can do that and we should do that. That day, I decided to run for president of the KBA, and as Judge Miller told you, in 1995, I was elected as the first woman president of the Kentucky Bar Association. And I cannot tell you the doors that opened for me along the way, as far as appointments to boards or other committees or meeting people or getting involved in the American Bar. It absolutely changed the course of my career. Shortly after that, I sat down and I actually wrote a note to Sarah Weddington telling her how much that her breakfast speech had influenced the way I changed the course of my career. And then several years later, Sarah and I were both in Washington, D.C. to get awards for a sorority that I was in. Now, granted, my award was something like Best Supporting Actor of a Short Documentary Film, and her award was Best Actress, but nonetheless, we were on the same podium. And you know what? She actually remembered my letter. She took my friend and me on a private tour of D.C. Remember, she had an insider trading. She told me that she got hundreds of letters. Most were hate mail with reference to Roe v. Wade. Some were thank you notes with reference to Roe v. Wade. But she said the reason she remembered my letter is because it meant so much to her that someone on the leadership aspect had changed a course due to her work. And we remain we remained friendly for several years. One of the morals of this story is that your mother was right. Go out and buy some stationery and write personal notes. If someone does something nice for you, write them a note, not an email. Write them a note thanking them. If someone gets an honor, write them a note. It's a lost art, but it really can be so effective. So looking back over what next week will be 72 years of my life, and next fall will be 45 years of practicing law, there are a few recurring themes. First of all, we can do it. Eleanor Roosevelt was right when she said, women are like a tea bag. You never know how strong they are until they get in hot water. Be strong. Sure, we're going to fail sometimes, but guess what? Men fail too. But when we fall, we're going to have others picking us up. Remember when you fly, the flight attendant has, in the unlikely event of loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will come on. And then what else do they say? They say, be sure to put your mask on yourself first before you help someone else. We can't help anyone else unless we have the strength, unless we have the oxygen to help ourselves. Do pay it forward. Do it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's the right thing to do. But also it's fun. I've learned a whole lot more from the young women I've tried to mentor than they've learned from me. And we've had wonderful laughs and wonderful times along the way. And finally, if you have a new challenge, go for it, even at age 72. It's what Louise Gasser Kirtley did. It's what I've tried to do. And it's what we all should do. You have no idea how many people are out there pulling for you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I believe that Louise Gasser Kirtley would have really liked you. She would have liked to meet you.
I would have liked her.
From everything I know about her. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. And I hope it's the message that particularly all the women will take home, that we do have to do what we think we can't do. That was wonderful. Y'all, let's give her another hand. Well, I know there's a sense of deja vu, but what we're here for also today is to rededicate the memorial to Elizabeth Gasser. Here I go. I want to apologize to the family. We all know who Louise Gasser Kirtley is. We proofread the program more times. These two women and me, I can't tell you how many times we proofread the program. We all knew Elizabeth as well. And I guess that was why it ended up in there. Elizabeth, for those of you who don't know, I think you all do, was Louise's sister. And she also was quite a strong woman in her own right. But we're here today to honor Louise Gasser Kirtley. And I just want to say a very few words before I let her son come up and speak. But this woman was not willing to settle for less. She was like Ms. Ridings. She did what needed to be done. Even in high school, she, as a senior, was working and speaking out for women's right to vote. She couldn't vote back then until she was 21. But as a high school senior, she was already arguing for that. And she always thought of herself, I think I'm far enough away from you and take this off. She always thought of herself as an equal. When she was in high school, she was on the basketball team. When she was in high school, she debated against two guys and won the debate. She became a lawyer in 1931, and again, your story's kind of parallel in that she was one of only two women in her law school class at U of L. And I'm thinking, and I may be wrong on this, but I think she was at the top of her class. If not, she was certainly close. But went to college at Smith College, graduated cum laude. Most people in Owensboro probably didn't even know where Smith College was at that time. But this was a woman who had vision. And she was one of only, as I said, 2 women in her class. And when she opened her law practice here in Owensboro, right there in that building where she grew up, that building had been an ice cream shop, little store that her parents ran. And their motto was, "We feed the people." And I don't know, I thought about that a lot. And I think that in some way that can be brought around to go with Louise Gasser Kirtley. She may not have fed the people, but I think she fed a lot of us who came later, in that she gave us courage and an example to live up to. She was a very polished presenter. She was not a pretentious woman, but she was very compassionate. And one of the things that I always thought was interesting, she did a lot of work with the women who worked at Kinrad. And some of that work was in divorce, because divorces were hard to get back then. And a lot of times when these women went to work and they became kind of independent, marriages fell apart. And she, a lot of times, would do that for no pay at all. If she did charge, she was paid by the Kinrad women in silver dollars. And it became a part of her tradition that when friends would have a baby, she would give them a silver dollar. Now, I know for you young people that doesn't sound like much, but it was back then. And she identified with single mothers, and she tried to help them because she knew how hard she had struggled with 3 children after her husband's death. She believed that you achieve on your own. She always was there if somebody needed her, but she believed in independence. Her husband was a city attorney, and they had the first husband and wife law practice here. He died in 1944, and she had 3 very young children. Elizabeth was 7, Bill was 5, and Bob was only 8 months old. And the law firm of Kirtley and Kirtley, though, she kept that name because she said, and this kind of always surprised me, she was keeping it for her boys. But remember, this is early. She was liberated, but she hadn't gotten all the way there yet, perhaps. But 2 of her sons did become lawyers, and her daughter, Elizabeth, became a teacher. When her husband died, she expected that she would be appointed to fill his place because they had worked together as a team. But she wasn't. And she was aware of that prejudice against women, but apparently never really complained or demanded equality, but she expected it and she took it. She never gave up. And she flaunted her femininity. Many of you have seen the pictures. She always had on pearls and this rather large butterfly pen. She used her femininity, and I think was someone later had said, I think it was Randolph Kramer, that she was a wolf in lamb's clothing, or a wolf in lamb's clothing, or a lamb in wolf's clothing. But I think it was just the opposite. She knew exactly what she was doing. She used what she had and who she was to her advantage. She was the police judge pro tem, 1946 to 1952, county attorney from 1958 to 1960. She ran for police judge and was narrowly defeated. And one reason was somebody said, well, what she would hear there would just not for women's ears. Now, she heard it when she was judge pro tem, but she was too delicate. She was elected, and this is something we're very proud of, as the first Daviess County woman to be elected to state office. She was elected to the House of Representatives for the Kentucky General Assembly for 2 terms. She was also the first female lawyer elected to the General Assembly. And she had been endorsed and encouraged by a lot of different groups here in Owensboro. And then in 1967, she ran for a 3rd term, and she always ended her speeches with "May the best woman win." Well, she was defeated in that particular election, and there had been rumors that she was not well, and indeed she was not. But this woman never admitted to anybody, including her own family, that she was quite ill. But she ran a lot of ads that said professional people favor Louise Kirtley. A lawyer speaks for Louise Kirtley. My favorite was young people like Louise Kirtley. A student at Kentucky Wesleyan College said that one, and he said, she is a good listener. And that is sometimes a trait that women have that is very important, is listening. Well, after she died, her funeral was, the eulogy was given by Randolph Kramer, who was an attorney here at that time. And he talked about the things that she did and how that she was always very, very proud, very poised. We all know about the story about how she would throw her handkerchief into the air if somebody said something like a dirty word or something, and she would act all shocked. But I think this was part of her, who she was. But she was a person who was proud of her profession. She was proud to be a lawyer. And he ended his talk with something that I think is most important. He said, if you seek a monument for Louise Kirtley, look at her children, to whom she was both mother and father. She had courage, and she had guts, and she had a deep faith in God. Back in high school, she made a statement that still resonates today. She said, the time of talk and argument is past. The time for deeds and action is here. We are now on the verge of the future. What words could be more appropriate today than those? So we're here today to once again honor, and for some of us, we will, every time we walk by here, we will honor Louise Gasser Kirtley. This was a woman of first, a woman who showed courage and dignity, and for all of us, no matter what profession we went into, she represents strong women, and she persevered and fought for all of us. And she should be an inspiration to every one of us, male and female, for continuing the fight for full equality. Now, last year, 2 of her children were here, Elizabeth and Bob, and many of her grandchildren. But her son from Oregon, her oldest son, Bill, was not able to be here because of COVID and getting on an airplane. Bill is here today, and he is going to come up here and say a few words. And Bill, when you come, I want you to introduce your family and have them all stand so we can see Louise's family. Will you do that? Thank you.
Before I introduce my family, I want to follow what my mother would do. In other words, she would gratefully thank Aloma Dew, Jeannie Owen Miller, and the Daviess County Fiscal Court for the honor they have bestowed on her. And now I'd like for, my brothers here, Bob, stand, Ashley, Stan, Susan, Liz, Liz wave, and Kurt, and Allison, and Alex. Anyway, we're all here, and oh yes, my daughter, who came in very late last night, and Susan, my wife, and I experienced that being 5 hours late getting out of Dallas-Fort Worth to get here. Anyway, sort of family legend has it that Mother decided to become a lawyer when she was in the 2nd grade. Why would a young girl in Kentucky decide to be a lawyer? The only thing, and I'm just speculating about it, is that her father died when she was 5. And her mother had to get rid of the family business that the 2 of them were running across the street here on the ground floor. I imagine her mother had a lot of dealings with lawyers, and Mother could sort of see what work they were doing and thought, I can do this. And so we, unfortunately, being a child of someone, quite often you don't ask the right questions. You're a little intimidated, perhaps. But, she had decided at early age, and as a Loma, well documented, she worked hard, and I think she did leave out that she was valedictorian of her high school class. Left me with a little something. And she then went off to Smith College. And and this is one of the sister 7 to the Ivy League. And why would a young woman in a small town in Kentucky go to sort of an elite school? We don't know. Perhaps because she went in 1921, 100 years ago. She graduated 100 years ago exactly this year. Smith may have been sort of well known for promoting women's rights. One of those mysteries. But she came back, taught school for a couple of years, and then went on to law school. The world hadn't changed much when I started law school in 1965, because out of a 240 student, we had 2 women. And so it was sort of comforting to know that my mother had 2, was one of 2. Now, I never practiced law with Mother. My brother did. And so we never discussed legal problems. But what I am left with is how she was as a parent. I'm thankful in a way for the typo with the students of my aunt, Elizabeth Gasser, because there are 2 women of note here. One is Elizabeth Gasser. Mother was the 11th of 12 children. Her younger sister was 12 of 12 children, and both of them were accomplished. Both graduated from Smith. Aunt Boo, and she and the family, my aunt was called Libba. In fact, I had a family member just the day before yesterday refer to Libba, and as a toddler, I couldn't quite handle Aunt Libba. So Aunt Libba became Aunt Boo, really, for all of our lives. Perhaps people outside the family didn't call her Aunt Boo, but that's what she was. And in 44, father died. In 45, our grandmother died. Aunt Boo was living with our grandmother, and the 2 of them formed a joint household. They ended up building a house together. They, had the same house, and the house went to the survivor under the way they owned the property. And they were also instrumental in our education. Now, one thing they wanted us to do was to see the world. So there were these extensive car trips. And there were 3 children in the back seat. I learned earlier to become a navigator, so I got a window. And my sister was senior, so that left Bob in the middle. But in 1946, they went back to Smith for their 20th college reunion, and we also went to New York City. In 1948, they loaded all of us up and drove along Route 66 to Los Angeles, and then they went up to Yellowstone, and we came back. 1951, these 2 women drove to Mexico City. And nobody was there driving for them. They were doing, except when we were in Mexico City, they did hire a Mexican to drive this tortuous road with cliffs down to a little town called Tosco. And Then in 1950, probably 51 or 3, went to Canada. And there were also trips to New Orleans, down along the Mississippi River, down to Florida, Key West. And so they showed us sort of the world. Now, I think my mother, there are two qualities that stand out. She was very interested in education, and it was not only academic education, what you learn in school, but it was learning to enjoy and see the world and marvel at it. We live in a great place. There are all sorts of things to try to understand. It always stimulates your mind. And so we had all these trips to do that. The second thing that she inspired us to do is respect for other people. Her thing that we heard, and probably most parents say it to their children, but we seem to have heard it much more than others. If you can't say something nice about somebody, don't say anything at all. And so we and saw Mother respect people and help people, and we believe that we need to help others. That's part of our DNA almost. And I can remember that in a way where some stranger helped us. We were in New York. This was back in 1946. We went up to the crown of the Statue of Liberty, and I somehow made it to the viewing area on the crown, but I was too scared to come down. And I checked recently, and what I discovered was that the steps were 12 inches, and the steps were 22 inches wide. So they were too narrow for an adult and a 5-year-old to be there together, and they were too deep and descended too quickly for a 5-year-old to make it down himself. And fortunately, a returning veteran from World War II picked me up, carried me down. And it's, just the kindness of people. And this is what Mother always sought to help people. And in closing, I'd like to thank again Aloma Du, Jeannie Owen Miller, Daviess County Fiscal Court, and Mother, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. And I hope you all will stay after and have some photos made together as a family. So, Jeannie, I think
I would like to, and I hope that they've stuck with us through the program, but I want to recognize the women in the crowd that have been elected to office. We have some judges, we have some circuit clerks, and various others, but I do want to recognize them. And I think that I see Judge Miller, and she's not any kin to me. If you all will stand, and I'm hoping I can find everybody. Jennifer B. Secker, who is the circuit court clerk. Pamela Smith Wright, who's a former city commissioner. We have Rachel Pence Foster, who is the property valuation administrator. And we have Judge Lisa Jones in the back, who is the circuit court judge. Do we have anybody else that I've overlooked? I'm sorry, Jennifer Hendricks, who is our Daviess County Bar Association president as well. Anybody else that I'm overlooking? Yeah, these are the women.
Sorry, Judge Payne.
Sorry, Judge Payne. These are the women. Big hand for everybody. Thank you all. Appreciate it. And it goes without saying, there's a lot of women probably in the crowd that have been in appointed offices as well. But it takes a lot of courage to run for office. And sometimes it takes a lot of money. But it is most important for us to recognize the women that have run for office and that will be running for office. All judges will be up for election in 2022. And so you need to kind of keep that in mind, if you would. So appreciate all of you all coming. I do want to mention before Judy gets up here for our final remarks, there are mementos here of the 19th Amendment in the scrolls on the basket. There's also cookies and there's water back there. And we really want to mention our county court clerk, Leslie McCarty, who can't be with us today, but she provided a voter registration station back there with the young ladies with the red, white, and blue. And so if you're not registered to vote, I can't imagine that anybody here isn't, but if you're not registered to vote, stop by and see those ladies and register to vote and vote. Thank you all.
Let me just add to that even if you're registered to vote, pick up a card. You could give it to someone who's not registered. They can fill it out and send it back to the county clerk's office. Well, Al Mattingly, although Jeannie thought so, Al did not steal my notes. This is Women's Equality Day, on a day in which we honor all the women who worked for suffrage. And we have many Daviess County women of the past to thank as we celebrate this 101st anniversary. For example, Frances Fanny Harrison Hayes helped to form that Owensboro Political Equality Club in 1895 when she was 32 years old. Owensboro hosted the convention of the Kentucky Equal Rights Association in 1914, and Fanny served for a while as superintendent of publications, vice president, and recording secretary of that organization. She was also the recording secretary of the Owensboro Equal Rights Association. But she started this when she was 32. Fanny was 57 years old when she was legally able to cast her ballot. Then there's Mary Phelan Gilmore. Mary Gilmore was active in the Republican Party and headed the effort to register women to vote after the 19th Amendment was passed. When her candidate, Warren Harding, won the presidency, she was appointed U.S. Postmaster for Owensboro in 1921, the first woman to hold that position. She also served on that infamous first all-woman jury in April of 1921. And then there's Catherine Rudy. Kitty, as she was called, was not your traditional 19th century young woman. She was independent and a tomboy. She was a 23-year-old single teacher in 1895 when she and her Aunt Mary, Mary Jewel Shipp, attended that first meeting of the Political Equality Club. Kitty helped to organize the 25th annual Kentucky Equal Rights Association meeting in Owensboro in 1914 and was elected a delegate to the National Equal Rights Association Convention in 1917. You may remember 1917 was the year when women were picketing the White House and were jailed and force-fed. So she was a piece of that history here. Both Kitty and Mary were active in the fight for women's equality their entire lives. Then there's Mary Hale Dean. As the first president of the Owensboro Women's Club and a supporter of women's suffrage, Mary Hale Dean worked to educate women about their rights and responsibilities once the 19th Amendment was passed. Her genealogy notebooks form the basis for the Daviess County Public Library Kentucky Room, and its collection is named for her. So say a big thank you to Mary Hale Dean the next time you visit the Daviess County Public Library. See, I'm not running on. As we leave here today, yes, we're going to leave here today, take the time to honor the stories of the strong, smart, and bold women in your lives. Thank you all for sharing this afternoon with us. We'll hope to see you next year as we celebrate the 102nd year of the women's vote during an election year. Thank you all for coming.